It's the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Snap into the action this NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. The app is super easy to use, and there's a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL.
It's another Mock Draft Monday on the newest edition of the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast. Draft season is officially here. Exhibition preseason NHL hockey is here. And that means Steele and I are here to make sure that you're dominating these fantasy hockey drafts. Thank you for joining us for the Monday edition. Let's get this paper.
You're Locked On Fantasy Hockey, your daily podcast on fantasy hockey. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in for the Monday edition of the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast. Back with my boy, Steele Roden, on the other side of the microphone. It's your boy, Big Flip Livingstone, and thank you for making us your first listen every single day. Steele, I'm honestly almost done with all of the preseason chat. We got a lot more coming, though. We got special guests this week. And yeah, these pre-draft excitement, it's important. I'm ready for the real hockey, baby. And on today's episode, we're doing a mock draft once again to make sure that all of the listeners out there know what to do round by round. What are we on the board here, Steele? A couple of minutes coming up. What draft picks are we in? We're looking at the same breakdowns, but I think what we're doing today is best available player by the overall ranking, and we'll break that down as well. I think that's what's important for today's episode.
Yeah, switching it up a little bit. We're drafting a little bit of a different strategy for today's mock draft. Best available player. Flip is drafting in the 6th position. I'm drafting in the 7th position out of 14 teams. So it is a pretty decently sized league for this mock draft. And before we get into it, like you stated, we are drafting the best available player and seeing how that team shapes out to be. Are we judging it based off of the expert preseason ranks or just the rank based on league settings? Which one would you like to go off of?
I think maybe let's just go off of the league settings. I think that's what I want to do, Steele. What do you want to do? This is why we like to have these conversations.
I'm good with either one. The expert ranking, obviously, they vary a little bit. When you look at the expert ranking, it's Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl first. When you go to the league settings, it's Connor McDavid and Nathan McKinnon first and second. So it's switching a little bit, but let's go off of the league settings here. That's what we're going to do for today. And we're drafting the best available players. Whoever's at the top of the board, that's who we're selecting.
Yeah, and this is, I think, going to be a really interesting conversation, Steele, because there are a lot of GMs out there in the fantasy world. You and I are been through the runner a few times. We've been through the mud. There's a lot of people joining in for the first time, and they might be looking at these rankings and go, this is exactly how I'm going to do my draft. And that's not something that I'm ever going to hate on someone for, especially someone new to the game. This will really help you if you are employing that kind of strategy and looking at it from that perspective. And also, Steele, I think you and I are going to also benefit from this, just having to look at where things are shaking out from these rankings. And obviously, Yahoo, Fantrax, ESPN, they're going to vary.
Yeah, and it makes our job a lot easier, too. Now we don't have to decide between who we want to actually select. We just take the top player off the board. So our selections are going to be very, very easy going for this entire mock draft. We're already into it. Connor McDavid, Austin Matthews, and Leon Draisaitl taken in the first 3. David Pastrnak next to that. Before we get to your pick here, Flip, just want to give a huge shout out to everybody who sent us DMs and comments on the YouTube channel who want to participate. We did the live draw. We've set up the 2 competitive and casual leagues. So we want to give a shout out to everyone that sent us DMs, but also a shout out to everybody who was also randomly selected. We've got people from Canada. We've got people from the States. We've even got one player in the competitive league all the way from Sweden. So shout out to you, Marcus. Thank you for tuning in. Flip, you are on the clock. Top player available is Jason Robertson right now.
Jason Robertson is available. And look, at the first couple of rounds of this, and as I select Jason Roberts, let me just say this. In a league, there's 14 GMs in this league, Steele. Unless you're in some sort of wild situation where there's more than that number and you're not in the top like 6 or 7, even the first round, you're going to get a really good player. It's just about what do you think the rest of your team is going to shake out to be? What are you trying to do with your squad? Jason Robertson stepped out in a huge way last year, and I don't think there's going to be really too much for us to break down in these first 2 rounds in terms of was this the spot they should go into, because I think that's going to make sense. It's really about what have we been saying, Steele? Balancing it out. Recognize who you've taken in the first round and understand what the rest of your roster needs, and don't focus on perhaps what the guys bring to the table in terms of the name and what they do to help your squad fill out and how your league breaks down.
Excellently well put there, Flip. That's exactly what all of the listeners need to hear right now. Balance out your teams. And again, just to reiterate that what we're doing here, we're taking the top available player on the draft board. So it is a position, highest ranking. It is a positional league. So there's 2 center, 2 left wing, 2 right wing, 4 defensive spots, 2 goalie spots. However, that doesn't mean you have to draft from the entire draft board. If you need a right winger, you can go to the right wing players over here and draft that top player on the board. Is that what we're also doing? Or is it just because we're going to have to draft, positionally here. So if you need a right winger, you can't just draft whoever's top on the board. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I agree. I think so, Steele. And look, this is how we're going to have to navigate this. So thank you for holding me down. But I agree. You're not just going to be selecting at will who's on the top list. You have to also address your positional needs 100%. And thank you for highlighting that, by the way. I appreciate you because I don't think I would have figured that one out, but that's why you're my co-host. You're holding me down.
That's why we're doing this together, baby. We're getting it done. Mock draft 4.0.
You're up in a sec here, but that's actually a really good point because some people will look at that and just start selecting. Yes. Obviously, address it positionally first. If you're running out of spots, don't just select 8 centers because they're on that list. Thank you for bringing that up, Steele. Hey, this is another On the Road episode for your boy. It's been a rough week, and thank you so much for holding me down.
I appreciate that, man. All the love to you and your family as well. I know it's been a little bit hard, but look, this is why we do this together. We lean on each other on these times, and doing back up to 5 episodes per week. It's going to be a lot, but we are ready for it. We're excited for the upcoming season. You're on the clock right now, so I'll let you make your decision. But I just want to highlight there, looking at the entire draft board, I would have, if we were going top available player, I would have had to draft Ilya Sorokin in the 2nd round, but we've talked about waiting to draft goaltenders. So that's why I went over to the center selection or the center drop down menu over here. And I drafted Mika Zibanejad, who was the top available center at the time.
And I absolutely love that. And actually, I think this is what I wanted to do was look at that from exactly how you just explained it. And Sorokin is available, and that's who I took. And this is not exactly about drafting exactly what I've done. I think what we're trying to highlight here is where these guys are at and available to know that Sorokin, in my opinion, Steele, is the best goalie headed into this season. And I know there's other out there. To me, fantasy-wise, he's the best goalie. And yeah, would I have waited for sure if this is just a regular breakdown of the draft? I would have maybe waited. But I'm actually okay. I think I did this last year, didn't I? And I took Sorokin.
You did take Sorokin in the 2nd round. Yes, you did.
What you're saying is accurate. And yes, you can employ the strategy of waiting. And would I have taken Sorokin in the 2nd round? No. But I'm actually okay with the 3rd or 4th round. Given my expectations for him, if I'm betting on the Vezina this year, Steele, I'm taking him.
Yeah, if we are betting people, we are betting men on this channel right now on this podcast, and that would be a smart bet. Ilya Sorokin, putting some money down on him. I obviously agree that he's a top 3 goaltender in the league. I still believe that Connor Hellebuyck is the best fantasy goalie right now. He's been one of the top fantasy goalies for the last number of years. So he would be my number 1 goalie off the board. But there's no argument whatsoever if you take Ilya Sorokin first.
Connor Hellebuyck just ran out of juice last year. He saw far too many pucks in Winnipeg. I'm employing your strategy now, Steele. I got my top left winger. I got my top goalie. I'm going to head over to the center list and look at the top available players. And we're talking again by ranking and we're drafting on Yahoo here. JT Miller is up there. You've won me over on this player, Steele, and he fills out so many categories. And since we're employing this strategy of the top available player at the positions, I'm going to take JT Miller. And so we're in the third round now. That might be a little bit too high, a little bit, but I think he just brings so much value across the categories that I'm not even mad about it.
I don't think that is too high. I think it's actually I think it's a little low, and we're not going to get back into it. But look, I know, I got to draft my player right now.
Yeah, you're on the board.
I'm going to take Timo Meier real quickly because he's the top rated right winger right now. He does fill out that left wing position because he's got dual eligibility. But going back to JT Miller, going back to the debate that we had against Miller and Jack Hughes. Obviously, Jack Hughes is going to get all the love. He's the hot hand right now in New Jersey. He's doing everything for them offensively. Really getting it done in the playoffs as well last year. Just a special talent. But a lot of people are going to forget about JT Miller and all that he brings to the game and fantasy especially. So JT Miller can be a sneaky pickup in the third round. I think it's a little low, but that's just me.
And I like that you're bringing up that angle about Hughes. You and I obviously went on a little bit of a heater on that conversation. Hughes over Miller, Miller over Hughes. Hey, we're not going to go back down that rabbit hole. I'm going to start to look at, and this is just one of those things that you and I have continued to say over mock drafts. And look, I had my Keeper Dynasty draft over the weekend, and some of these things just hold true across whatever format you're doing. Recognize what you've already done in your draft, and it doesn't even matter. We're only through 3 rounds, right? We're in the 4th round. Recognize exactly what you have on your team. What position? What team are they on? What do they bring to your squad? Because the second you just start firing off picks for the sake of stacking up players that you like, and I've been a victim of this, it's a mistake. And I think what I wanted to say is let's have a look at what our teams look like at the end of this recording, at the end of this episode, and maybe explain it a little bit of what we think about that. Because sometimes, and I've been a victim of it, you just start drafting players you really love and you forget about what your team actually needs. Like, don't load up on one position, balance it out. And that's why I'm starting to look at a D-man, because I have a center, I have a left wing, I have a goalie. I want to add to my blue line in this next pick.
Next pick coming right up. We got a whole entire mock draft to continue, round 5 and beyond that. But we also got to give a shout out to all of our sponsors out there, Flip.
Yes, we do. Steele, you're my boy. Thank you for the call out. Today's episode is brought to you by Jace Medical. Everyone should be empowered to care for themselves and their loved ones during the unexpected, and that's why Jace Medical offers the Jace Case. The Jace Case provides 5 life-saving antibiotics for emergency use and gives you a peace of mind that you're not just hoping for, you have access to in an emergency. Jace Medical makes sure that you have the medication in hand. Jace Medical is simple. They handle everything from the online evaluation to licensed pharmacy medication, delivery, and ongoing consultation and care. Don't get caught unprepared. Get $20 off the life-saving antibiotics today from Jace Medical by using code LOCKEDON at checkout, jacemedical.com. That's JASE medical.com.
This is David Harrison of the Locked On Commanders podcast to draw your attention to the taste that's going down in the bread aisle. All thanks to Dave's Killer Bread, bread amplified. Anyone can bake bread, few can rock it, and Dave's Killer Bread is the champion of killer taste, killer texture, and is for those who want to rise above the boring. Organic and healthy doesn't have to mean boring when it's made with the highest quality organic and non-GMO ingredients, packed with whole grains, fiber, and protein. 21 whole grains and seeds bread has a subtle sweetness and a seed-coated crust, while good seed products are the boldest and sweetest of all. Dave's Killer Bread was built on the belief that second chances can change lives, because after spending 15 years in prison, not only did the guy with the guitar you see on every loaf turn his own life around, he's helping others to do the same. By hiring the best people for the job, regardless of their background, he's ensuring your mornings no longer taste like cardboard, your taste buds don't have to feel sedated, and your sandwiches can become superstars. Visit daveskillerbread.com to learn more and look for Dave's Killer Bread in the bread aisle of your favorite grocery store.
And thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every single day. We appreciate all that love and support you show us Monday through Friday. Make sure you continue hitting that subscribe button, the follow button, leave a 5-star review. And again, shout out to everybody who DM'd us and left a comment on the YouTube channel. We really do appreciate all the support you show us. And again, shout out to everybody who was selected in the random draw. We cannot wait for both of these casual and competitive leagues coming up this upcoming season. Flip, I know you were doing the ad read there, showing some love to Jace Medical. Who was that player that you, not purposely selected?
It was auto-drafted to Zach Hyman, which I don't hate because I
don't hate it either.
What's going on in Edmonton is not following the script of what we're doing, but if you want to just get my analysis on Zach Hyman very quickly, I think getting a piece of what's going on in Edmonton is huge. But now that I am back on the board, I'm going to look at the top D-man that's available, and this is another thing. The top D-man that's available right now is injured, so I'm going to go to the second one, guys. Take a look at what's going on injury-wise. Brandon Montour is at the top of this list, but Victor Hedman is second, and I would rather take Victor Hedman in this situation. This is a bit of an on the fly draft analysis, but I'm here for it.
I absolutely love that. Again, if someone don't draft the top player if he's injured and going to be out for a long while. If he's going to be injured out for the first couple of weeks, draft him. If he's just out for the first couple of weeks of the season, but if he's out for 2-3 months or more than that, don't draft him, even though he's at the top of the board. I'm going to my boy over here, Joe Pavelski, getting that second center position. Look, I've been trying to draft right wingers, but because they've got dual eligibility, they keep filling in other spots right now. So I still need 2 right wingers on my roster over here, but I've also got 1 defenseman. So I could be looking for a defenseman or a goaltender, my next pick.
To be clear, Pavelski was at the top of the right wing list.
He was at the top. Yeah, he was at. Well, he's got that dual eligibility. So
no. I'm just saying this is one of those things that I think is actually highlights those points that I've been saying, Steele, that the right wing position this season isn't exactly deep. And I know the dual eligibility side of things brings a wrinkle to that. But just talking about pure right wingers, and these are going to update, right? These are going to change very quickly over the next couple of weeks as these guys start to fall into the actual roles they're going to play. So don't forget that when you're drafting over the next even 10 to 15 days, that it might be showing dual eligibility. Half the guys I drafted last night still had dual eligibility on FanTrack, and I'm almost assured that they're not going to have that even in a few days once you start to see those line rushes. So that's another one of those wrinkles ahead of the draft to keep an eye on.
Exactly. Good point there, Flip. I did want to ask you this as well. We are, again, every single mock draft that we do, we're drafting from a different position. You and I both now right in the middle of things at number 6 and number 7. Yeah. I remember you saying you prefer drafting either first or last. Like, how do you feel about drafting in the middle of a 14-team league?
Honestly, getting it in the middle is probably my least favorite. I would rather be, obviously, like, this is the thing. Top pick is the best spot. And after that, though, given how many, it depends on the GMs, but I really do like drafting in the last spot to have 2 in that first round, 2 selections. 6 to me might be like my least favorite for sure. Drafting in the middle, I think, is probably the most unlucky, but you're back on the board here in a sec.
Yeah, back on the board. I think this is going to be the time when I take my first goaltender. Miro Heiskanen's still on the board. I might draft Miro Heiskanen before my first goaltender because there's still a couple of some young bucks, some young studs there in the blue paint. So if Miro Heiskanen doesn't get picked here again, I'm not going to draft Brandon Montour because he is injured. He will be out for a long time to start the beginning of the season, I believe. Still recovering from that injury he suffered in the playoffs. Dubois goes before in the 77th pick. I'm going to go with Miro Heiskanen as the top healthy available defenseman right now and get Dougie Hamilton and Miro Heiskanen on my blue line.
There's some interesting names here in terms of best available. Philip Gustafsson, Adrian Kempe, Elias Lindholm, Vitek Vanacek. These are the Yahoo rankings. And I'm going to go back to, I want to address my goaltending situation, Steele. I do.
Dang it.
I'm going to wait. I should wait. So I'm going to go to the right wing and take the top available right winger in Adrian Kempe.
I love that player.
I love this player. And look, are the LA Kings going to perhaps have some issues with what they've done in net, which I think is very risky to bring in Cam Talbot and have Phoenix Copley as your other option? That could be a power situation, but everything else about this team screams playoff threat. And I think that Adrian Kempe is going to be a big part of that.
And you're back also on the clock here, Flip.
Center and white ring eligibility. I'm going back to a D-man steal, and I'm going to go right back to the top of the list. Let's try and follow this theme as much as we can. Brandon Montour is too banged up for me. might miss the start of the season. He probably will. Mikhail Sergachev is next, and I'm happy to take it. You know, I also love me some Sergachev. It is a bit bold, though, however, to take two of the top D-men from the same team.
It could be. Definitely could be a trading piece, though.
Oh.
In the first part of the season. I'm also going to continue on the blue line here because Darnell Nurse is available. So I'm going to go Darnell Nurse. I'm loving my defenseman right now. I got Dougie Hamilton, Miro Heiskanen, Darnell Nurse. And it just so happened by accident when I drafted my first defenseman, who was Dougie Hamilton, I also happened to draft Timo Meier, who was the top left winger available. So that's going back to my strategy of drafting a top defenseman with a top forward for a top team in the NHL.
You know, I like that one, Steele. We're flying off the board here. There's a lot of auto drafts. This is going to be a hectic episode. You're back up, pal. Go ahead.
Back up. This is when I will officially take my first goaltender. It looks like I'm a New Jersey Devils fan right now because I've got Vitek Vanacek. He is the top available goaltender right now. So he will be my first goaltender. I've got one more goaltender slot, but there's a lot of goaltenders still on this list and available.
Very interesting, though, that he's even ranked ahead of Tristan Jarry, ranked ahead of Stuart Skinner. That's very interesting for me, Steele. I want to look to my right wing slot again, just to make sure, because it is so shallow. Top ranking, Jonathan Marchessault. So I'm going to take him, even though the other guys on the list below him might be even more intriguing, Steele. Lawson Krauth, Seth Jarvis, Jake DeBrusk. This is actually really helpful for me looking at this. Guys and gals, don't read too much into these expert rankings on the sites you're using to draft. This is actually probably the best piece of advice you could get, Steele, is make sure you do your own research. And I'm back on the board here, but what do you think about that take?
I love it. You got to do your own research. We're going to talk about this for a full episode, maybe later this week or, before the season starts, but we're going to list some of the top reasons of what you need to do to be successful in your fantasy league with your fantasy team. So I like that you're highlighting that point there, Flip. I'm back on the clock. Who did you just draft? Did you just draft Vince Dunn?
Top defenseman left ranked on the board ahead of Pietrangelo, Doughty, and others was Vince Dunn. So that's what we're doing, baby. And I don't actually hate it.
Look, I still officially don't have I have a couple right wingers on my roster, but officially they're in the left wing position. But I'm going to Evander Kane, even though he's only eligible for that left wing position. So he's going to be the first player on my bench spot. So technically, I still need to fill out that right wing roster spot. But we've got a long way to go. We're only in round 9 right now. But I also got to mention this. This episode is also brought to you by FanDuel, one of our favorite sponsors right now. We love all of our sponsors, but FanDuel, go check them out. Make sure you register and get going with them, especially for the NFL season. Snap into the action with the NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. And if you're thinking about joining FanDuel, which I suggest you do, there's no better time to get into the action right now. The app is so easy to use. There's a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. Of course, the same game parlay is my favorite feature. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season right. That's FanDuel, official partner of the NFL.
Disney Plus, Hulu, and ESPN Plus. This fall, the Disney Bundle has all the action.
Holy smokes!
Watch live NFL and college football games on ESPN Plus. On Disney Plus, there's Loki Season 2.
War is on its way.
And Ahsoka.
Buckle up.
And on Hulu, you can watch The Boogeyman and Welcome to Wrexham.
Oh my God, the expectation.
All of these and more streaming this fall with the Disney Bundle. Blackouts and restrictions apply. 18 plus only. Access content from each service separately. Offer valid for eligible subscribers only. Terms apply.
And thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every single day. We appreciate all that love and support you show us. So again, hit that subscribe, hit the follow button, leave a 5-star review. This draft is going crazy right now. We're flying through the picks, Flip. I had to auto draft the top right wing position, and I don't even hate it. Rickard Rakell, we've talked a little bit about him and the opportunity he's going to get, again, playing in the top 6 group with Sidney Crosby, Jake Gensel, Evgeny Malkin. I liked him last year, fairly impressive. So even though he was an auto draft, I actually like Rickard Rakell in my right wing position.
And what's really interesting, Steele, is what I said before about these rankings. Because if I'm looking at, I want to get my goalie again. We're in the 11th round. I don't want to wait any later. The ranked goalies are Antti Ranta, then Logan Thompson, Aiden Hill, Markstrom, Talbot, Copley. And I see Ville Husso down here, who to me looks like he's going to get by far the most chance to be the legitimate number one of any of those goalies. So that's who I would look to. If I have to take the guy on the top, it's Antti Ranta. So you go and do that. But if I'm looking at it realistically, you should be taking a guy like Ville Husso. And now things have honestly just gotten so off the rails, Steele, because the pick before that, when I was looking at it, was Akira Schmid. He was ahead of all of those players in terms of the ranking. And honestly, I'm really glad that we've looked at it like this, because it's proving to me even more that all that really matters is you doing your own research and making sure that your team is balanced, because these rankings are so all over the map. And also remember what your categories are broken down in.
Exactly right, Flip. Good, another good point from you. Just making sure your team is balanced properly. So far, we've been drafting the top available player. Obviously positional wise,
as most we can.
As most as we can. I've drafted the top available player, the healthy player. Might I add. Again, we skipped over Brandon Montour because he's injured. But I've drafted every single player from that top position. I love my team right now. Mika Zibanejad, Joe Pavelski, Matthew Tkachuk, Timo Meier, Ricard Raquel, Dougie Hamilton, Miro Heiskanen, Darnell Nurse, Vitek Vanacek, Evander Kane, and Vincent Trocheck are the two players on my bench right now. I love my team. It's not bad at all drafting from the top position or drafting the top available player.
It's definitely not. And then maybe actually at the same time, look at my team. It's a bit of a mess. JT Miller, Adrian Kempe, okay. Robertson and Hyman at the left wing, okay. Marchessault, I think, was too high of a pick. My blue line, sure, Hedman, Sergachev, and Dunn. But I got Akira Schmid as my second goalie, and my first bench player was Max Domi. And actually, maybe the fact that they auto-draft is even more of an indication, because they were taken right off the top, that it has to be you knowing what you're doing with what you're trying to achieve with your team.
Yeah.
And taking a look at these rankings, sure, they hold some value. I'm not on here trying to poo-poo over everything that these mean, because they mean something. And the last available player right here on the top for the D-men is Uyghur over Chychrun and Larson. I would much rather Chychrun and Larson, but go with Uyghur. That doesn't make sense to me either, Steele. And I think you're going to back me up on this one with Uyghur in specific.
Yeah,
I think we saw a little bit of an enigma from him, and I think he's going to continue to settle back down to the level that he actually was.
And that's exactly why I also passed on Mackenzie Weegar. I was looking to draft a defenseman, but he was that top defenseman there. So trying to stick to what we're doing for today's episode.
But you would have passed.
I would have passed on him. That's why I went over to the goalie section, and I ended up drafting Logan Thompson for that round, skipping over Mackenzie Weegar. So I decided to go to another top available player just from a different position.
Yeah, for sure. Now that we're back to the bench spots, top available player there, Buchnevich. So that's who I'm going with. Buchnevich is one of those really tough players to put a finger on, Steele. So this is interesting now, but maybe it's more important to remember right before your draft, check everything, injuries, updates. And actually, Steele, you and I are going to break down all of our top tips to how you dominate the draft. So I'll save that for that episode. But the theme holds the same. Make sure you are prepared. I've gone into draft, Steele, honestly going, I'll have a beer, I'll sit down here, I'll look at these rankings, and I'll be good. I think what we've done on today's episode, even though it has been a bit hectic, is proven that method is not going to work.
Doesn't work majority of the time. And again, going back to my last pick right here, I ended up having to draft, I had to look for my right wing position, and Valeri Nichushkin was the top available right winger. I don't know what's going on with him this upcoming season. Right. Is he going to be playing right off the start? Are there things that are, come to light with what happened last year in Seattle with him? So that could be a risky player to go after. But he was the top available player. So I had to stick to the script here, and I drafted Valeri Nichushkin to fill out my last right wing position.
Yeah, that when it comes to the off ice things, I think you and I have looked at injuries as something that can be hard to take a look at in terms of whether you want to draft a player or not. These off ice issues are a whole other wrinkle. And you're right. You're bringing it up. I think the best approach with that kind of situation is probably to stay away. Yep. Maybe you get lucky and in your real draft, you'll just take a flyer on him as like your last or second last pick and hope that things work out. this is again highlighting why maybe that top available player, best available by ranking, is probably not who you want to be going with every single time. Although your team has worked out pretty good still.
It has worked out pretty well. I'm up here, I'm up right now on the clock. I was looking at a defensive position, and the guy I wanted is right at the top of the list here. I know you like Adam Larson. He brings the hits. He brings the blocks. Even occasionally, the offensive production from Larson is good. His plus minus has been great the last few years. Adam Larson will fill out my last defensive spot, and then I've got 2 bench spots remaining.
I still need a right winger, and I have to take Vladimir Tarasenko, but with Lawson Krause on the board, Seth Jarvis, Matt Barzal, Matt Duchesne, even in a really good situation in Dallas, those would be the names that I'm looking at over Vlad Tarasenko, because I don't know. I'm a little bit concerned that he's not going to fit in fully. I know that doesn't really make a whole lot of sense, but I would draft all those other guys ahead of Tarasenko, but he's top ranked, so I'm going with Tarasenko here. And I've said a lot about what's going on in Ottawa, so he's probably going to get some points. But I don't know, Steele. That's just one of those my gut feelings. And you know how high I am on players like Krause, Jarvis, and Barzal.
Yeah. No, of course. I completely understand where you're coming from. Drafting, wanting to draft those players over Tarasenko. You're back on the clock, Flip. But I've always been a fan of Tarasenko. He got out of that situation in St. Louis. He came back from that shoulder surgery as well, and he absolutely put up a fantastic season, 80 plus points, I believe. So, will he get back up to there playing with these guys in Ottawa? It's very likely, because he's playing with Tim Stützle, he's playing with Brady Tkachuk, he's playing with Claude Giroux. It could happen, but I think somewhere around 65, 70 points is where Tarasenko will fall.
That honestly, Steele, if I'm breaking it down, would be too high for me. I see it for sure, because they're going to score, but I don't know. I'm just not buying into it. I'm more in the 50 to 55 point realm, but obviously he's been a sniper and a really consistent piece. He has had, though, very serious injuries.
He has.
And again, that's not something that you're going to bank on a guy to get hurt, but this Ottawa team has some serious pressure on it. Let's be real. They continue to crush it in the offseason, and then they do not perform in the regular season. There's a lot of high expectations. They brought in a lot of pieces to make sure that this team is, and you hear what Dorian's saying, a year-to-year perennial cup threat. I just need to see it on the ice before I actually put that kind of moniker on them. I want a backup goalie in my last slot here, Steele. I have 1 bench spot left. The top available goaltender that's still around is actually what should be the number 1, quote-unquote, in Vegas. If you can get Adin Hill right at the back end of your draft as your last selection, I'm actually kind of liking that, Steele, but this has been a very all-over-the-board mock draft. Let's be real.
Yeah, it has been. That last pick of yours, Adin Hill, scares me a bit because I drafted Logan Thompson, so it's going to be interesting to see how Vegas plays out those 2 goaltenders. Do they go with the guy who, pretty much got not him alone, but he was a big part of the reason why they won.
End of that run,
huge part of the end in the postseason, Adin Hill, and then Logan Thompson, the young guy, who was really blossoming coming into his own form for the Vegas Golden Knights before he went down to injury. I'll let you start off first. List off your team, how you're feeling about it, and then I'll go.
Honestly, Steele, considering how all over the map my team has been, I got Akira Schmid in net. I've got a couple of questionable pieces. Jonathan Marchessault came off the board very early for me. The main takeaway that I have for this whole situation, honestly, is when you're looking at what your format of your league is, come into the draft prepared. Come into the draft with a strategy. And you even said this, I think, a couple episodes ago when I drafted a player that you were looking at. And of course, that's going to happen. Your pick comes up. You got your eyes peeled on a player, and it goes. When you have a good strategy in place and a good approach, that second guy that you want to take, or even third, if that happens. And that's the main takeaway here, because looking at my team, Steele, it's all over the map. And that might be the best important note to take, is know what you're doing going in, because things can go a little haywire, Steele, and you got to keep it together. Yeah. So that's all I really want to say, because I really think the draft pieces of my team don't actually matter as much. It's about how you're approaching your draft.
Exactly. Always have a backup plan, have a second, have a third, even a 4th player, just in case that player you want has already been taken when your pick comes up. This actually worked out pretty well. I wasn't too sure about the strategy going into this, how it would end up, but I actually really like my team. I think this might be my favorite team so far. Whoa. Actually, out of all the mock drafts we've done. Mika Zibanejad, Joe Pavelski, Matthew Tkachuk, Timo Meier, Ricard Raquel, Valeri Nichushkin, Dougie Hamilton, Miro Heiskanen, Darnell Nurse, and Adam Larsson. This might be the best defensive group I've drafted.
That blue line is nasty.
Yeah, that blue line, that's the best defensive group I've drafted ever in any fantasy league.
I like it. Balanced as well.
Vitek Vanacek, Logan Thompson, Evander Kane, Vincent Trocheck, Ivan Barbashev. You know I had to get my boy there. He was on the top of the list at the time.
Great picks. Your goalies might be the weakness there, though, Steele.
The goalies are the weakness for sure. Vitek Vanacek will be number one to start off with because he's earned that. I believe he's earned that over the last 3 seasons in the NHL and last year with the New Jersey Devils.
Sure.
But I really like this team. I really like the team, how it panned out. Obviously, this is not going to be the strategy I implicate when we're doing the casual and competitive league or any fantasy draft. But so far, the first time I've used it, it's worked out pretty well.
Look, that was an intense episode. It went all over the map. I hope people have enjoyed it because I think when I look at and I mentioned that I did my Keeper Dynasty draft just the other night, and aside from being straight up and down excited is things can honestly get hectic when you're doing a draft.
Yes.
You're on the clock, you hear the time. If we're just talking about like the bare bones of doing a fantasy hockey draft, those kinds of things can get in your way of taking the right player. And that's even more to the point that I was trying to make. When you're prepared, some of those more hectic moments aren't as hectic and they allow you to make the better pick. So I hope that's what we've provided for you on today's episode, that's really how you make a good team in the fantasy hockey world, Steele. And look, I've been a victim of not doing that and it hasn't worked out. So just take my advice. Trust me.
Do your research, come prepared, and execute the plan to the full potential of what you see your fantasy team can be. Thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every single day. Make sure you're tuning in Monday through Friday, 7 o'clock in the morning Eastern time is when you can find all of our episodes. Again, thank you so much to everybody who DM'd us, who is a part of the Casual and Competitive League. Shout out to everybody. We appreciate you all. Have a great day. Good luck with all your bets out there, and we shall see you back here again tomorrow.
Peace.
JamesAllen.com is the online destination to easily design a customized engagement ring and save up to 50% compared to traditional stores. You pick a diamond, whether it's lab-created or earth-created, James Allen has over 200,000 conflict-free stones. Then you pick your ring setting and metal. And if you need some help, they have real-time diamond consultations available, where an expert can walk you through it all. Get 25% off your order at JamesAllen.com, code LOCKEDON. That's JamesAllen.com, code LOCKEDON.